The environmental control panel sparked again, and Ben Carter sighed. This was the third malfunction this week in Lecture Hall 14B. He knelt beside the wall unit, toolbox open, while students filed past him into the tiered seating. Nobody looked at him twice. Maintenance workers were invisible to most people, human or otherwise. Professor Dalla entered, her forearms carrying data pads and holographic projectors. She was from a species Ben couldn't pronounce, covered in soft gray fur with large eyes that reminded him of a deer. She arranged her materials at the podium while her students settled into their seats. Today we discuss planetary classification systems, the professor began. Her voice was gentle, melodic. Specifically, how we categorize worlds by their danger levels. Ben continued working, only half listening. He'd heard plenty of lectures during repairs. Academic stuff usually put him to sleep. Class 1 worlds have mild environmental challenges, Dalla explained. Perhaps extreme temperatures in certain regions or occasional seismic activity. Class 2 worlds introduce biological hazards, typically aggressive plant life or simple predators. Class 3 worlds feature organized predator species with territory control. A student raised a thin, crystalline appendage. What about Class 4, Professor? Class 4 worlds have apex predators, Dallas said. Species at the top of their food chains with no natural enemies. These worlds are rare and produce incredibly dangerous fauna. Only the most cautious species evolve to sentience there. Ben's wrench slipped. Class 4? Earth had dozens of apex predators. Bears, tigers, crocodiles, sharks. Humans had lived alongside all of them. However, the professor continued, her voice dropping slightly. There exists a Class 5 category. Deathworlds. The lecture hall went quiet. Even Ben stopped working. Deathworlds contain multiple competing apex predators, Dallas said. Environments so hostile that everything evolves to kill or avoid being killed. The Galactic Council has identified only 3 species that achieve sentience on Class 5 worlds. 2 destroyed themselves before reaching space. The third remains classified. A small, rabbit-like student named Pris raised her paw nervously. Why classified, Professor? Because they survived, Dalla answered. Any species that reaches sentience on a death world would possess traits we can barely imagine. Enhanced aggression, superior hunting instincts, pack coordination, persistence that borders on obsession. They would be, in essence, the perfect predators. Ben felt his heartbeat quicken. She was describing humans. Earth was the classified world. Their eyes would face forward. The professor continued, gesturing to her own side-mounted eyes. Binocular vision for tracking prey across distances. Their bodies would be built for endurance, not speed. Deathworld predators don't sprint, they pursue. They follow prey for hours, days even, until exhaustion makes the kill easy. Several students shifted uncomfortably. Pris looked genuinely frightened. They would have exceptional pattern recognition, Dalla added. The ability to predict behavior, set traps, plan ambushes. Social structures would be complex, allowing for pack tactics and coordinated hunts. They might even develop language primarily for hunting communication. Ben wanted to laugh. Humans did have forward-facing eyes and persistence hunting abilities. Marathon runners could outlast horses. But language for hunting? Humans talked about everything. Art, philosophy, terrible jokes, feelings they couldn't explain. Professor, a tall student named Toll spoke up, his crystalline body refracting the light. Surely such creatures would be solitary. Too aggressive for civilization. An excellent point, Dalla agreed. Most predator species are indeed solitary or form small family units. But deathworld predators would need cooperation to survive. They might form larger groups out of necessity, though constant internal competition would make true peace impossible. Every interaction would carry underlying threat assessment. Ben thought about his apartment building back home. 70 families living in one structure. Children playing in hallways. Neighbors borrowing sugar and sharing meals. Was that constant threat assessment? Their emotional capacity would be limited, the professor said. Empathy is a prey trait, after all. It helps herd animals protect each other. Predators need decisiveness, not compassion. They would view other beings as resources, potential prey, potential threats, or potential pack members. Nothing more. Now Ben felt genuinely offended. He'd cried at movies. He'd donated to charities. He'd spent 2 hours last week helping Pris, that same frightened student, fix her transport pod when it broke down outside the station. She'd thanked him profusely, never knowing what he was. Next week, Professor Dalla announced, we'll examine preliminary data on the classified species. I've requested special clearance from the council. You'll see what true apex predators look like. The students murmured with mixed excitement and fear. Ben's tool clattered loudly against the metal floor. Everyone turned to look. Ben froze, meeting Professor Dalla's large eyes for just a moment before she looked away, already dismissing him as unimportant. Just a maintenance worker. Just background noise. The lecture continued with questions and discussions about theoretical hunting patterns. Ben gathered his tools slowly, but he didn't leave. He couldn't. They were talking about his people, his planet, his species, and every word was wrong. Not entirely wrong, he admitted. Humans were persistent. Humans did have binocular vision and pattern recognition. Humans had hunted mammoths to extinction and conquered every environment on Earth. But they weren't monsters. They weren't emotionless killing machines. Could such a predator integrate into galactic society? A student asked. Unlikely, Professor Dalla replied. The risk will be too great. Predator protocols exist for good reason. These creatures would need constant monitoring, restricted access to technology, limited movement between stations. For everyone's safety. Ben's jaw tightened. 47 humans currently worked across various stations, all keeping quiet about their origins. All trying not to scare anyone. And here was proof that no matter how careful they were, the galaxy had already decided humans were too dangerous to trust. He finished packing his tools and stood. The lecture was ending anyway. Students filed out, still chattering nervously about Deathworlds and apex predators. Pris scurried past him, clutching her data pad to her chest. Ben almost called out to her. Almost reminded her about the transport pod, about how he'd helped her even though he was supposedly an emotionless predator. But he stayed silent. Professor Dalla was erasing her holographic displays when Ben walked toward the exit. She didn't look at him. None of them ever really looked at him. Maybe that was safer for everyone. Ben should have left after that first lecture. Common sense told him to walk away, file his repair report, and forget what he'd heard. Instead, he found himself back in Lecture Hall 14B 3 days later, pretending the ventilation system needed another inspection. He positioned himself in the corner again, partially hidden behind a support column. The same students filed in, including nervous Pris and analytical Toll. Professor Dalla arrived precisely on time, her materials already organized. We continue our examination of Deathworld predators, she announced without preamble. Today's focus is behavioral psychology and hunting methodology. Ben's hands stilled on a scanner. He told himself he was being masochistic, but he couldn't stop listening. Apex predators employ two primary hunting strategies, Dalla explained, projecting images of various alien creatures. Ambush predation involves waiting, camouflage, explosive speed. Think of the Carthian sand trap or the Velen shadow stalker. They strike once decisively. The images shifted to show creatures with powerful legs and razor-sharp appendages. Students took notes diligently. Pursuit predation is different, the professor continued. These hunters follow prey over extended distances, using superior endurance and relentless determination. The prey may be faster initially, but the predator never stops. Eventually, exhaustion becomes the weapon. A student Ben didn't recognize raise the tentacle. Which method would Deathworld predators use? Both, Dalla answered simply. A Class 5 predator would need versatility to survive. They'd ambush when possible, pursue when necessary, and adapt their strategy to each situation. This flexibility would make them exceptionally dangerous. Ben thought about human history. Hunters tracking deer through forests. fishermen waiting patiently by rivers, soldiers using guerrilla tactics and strategic planning. She wasn't wrong exactly. She just made it sound so sinister. Let's discuss pack dynamics, the professor said, her tone growing more serious. Solitary predators are predictable. Pack predators are not. They communicate, coordinate, distribute roles based on individual strengths. Toll's crystalline structure seemed to brighten with interest. How would they communicate during hunts? Vocalizations would alert prey. Excellent question, dalla prized. Deathworld pack predators would likely develop subtle communication methods. Body language, minimal sounds, perhaps even pre-planned signals. The ability to execute complex group tactics silently would be a significant evolutionary advantage. Ben nearly smiled despite himself. She just described military hand signals, which humans had used for thousands of years. But humans also used those signals for construction work, sports, diving, directing traffic. Context mattered. Social structures among such predators would be fascinating, the professor continued. Pack hierarchy would be essential. Dominance displays, submission gestures, constant testing of boundaries. Every interaction reinforces the pecking order. Pris raised her paw tentatively. Would they have families? Children. Dalla's expression softened slightly. That's the unsettling part. Yes, they would. Even the most dangerous predators care for their young. But that care would be practical, not emotional. Teaching hunting skills, establishing territory awareness, preparing offspring for survival. Love as we understand it would be alien to them. Ben's chest tightened. He thought about his mother reading bedtime stories. His father teaching him to ride a bicycle, patient through every fall. His sister's wedding, where everyone cried happy tears. That wasn't practical. That was love, pure and simple. They would form bonds, Dallo acknowledged, as if reading his thoughts. But those bonds would serve survival purposes. Pair bonding for reproductive success. Parent-offspring bonds for knowledge transfer. Pack bonds for hunting efficiency. Remove the survival advantage, and the bond dissolves. That sounds lonely, Pris said softly. Loneliness is a prey emotion, the professor replied gently. It evolved to keep herd animals together for protection. Predators don't experience loneliness. They experience territory disputes and resource competition. Ben wanted to shout that he'd been lonely plenty of times. Homesick on this station, missing Earth's sky and oceans. Missing friends and family. Missing simple things like rain and grass and birds singing. Predators didn't feel that. Consider their sensory capabilities, Dalla continued, shifting topics. Enhanced vision, obviously, but also superior hearing for tracking prey through obstacles. Acute smell for following trails. Possibly even the ability to detect fear in other species through chemical signals. Several students glanced around nervously, as if expecting a predator to leap from the shadows. They would read emotional states instinctively, the professor added. Not through empathy, but through pattern recognition. Identifying weakness, exploiting vulnerability. A wounded herd member, a frightened child, an isolated individual. These would all trigger hunting responses. Toll spoke up again. Professor, you describe them as almost mechanical. Surely, any sentient species develops beyond pure instinct. A fair point, Dalla conceded. Sentience would add complexity. They'd develop culture, technology, perhaps even philosophy. But the predator foundation would remain. You can teach a hunting creature to use tools, but you cannot remove the urge to hunt. Ben's hands clenched into fists. Humans had invented agriculture specifically to stop hunting, built cities to live peacefully together, created laws to protect the weak, made art to express beauty they didn't need for survival. Every generation chose civilization over savagery. The classified species concerns me greatly, Professor Dallas said quietly. Initial reports suggest they've achieved significant technological advancement. Space travel, energy manipulation, artificial intelligence. Imagine predator instincts combined with advanced weaponry. The lecture hall fell silent. Even Toll stopped taking notes. The council debates constantly. The professor continued. Do we make contact? Establish boundaries? Attempt integration? Or do we simply monitor and contain? There's no precedent for this situation. What do you recommend, Professor? A student asked. Dalla was quiet for a long moment. Caution, she finally said. Extreme caution. We cannot afford to underestimate what evolution created on that world. Our entire civilization is built on cooperation and mutual trust. Theirs will be built on competition and survival. Those philosophies may be fundamentally incompatible. Ben felt something crack inside him. Not anger exactly, more like resignation. No matter what humans did, how carefully they integrated, how peacefully they behaved, they'd always be seen as the monsters from the Deathworld. The lecture ended with assigned readings about predator containment strategies. Students filed out, their conversations subdued and worried. Pris looked particularly shaken. Ben remained in his corner, tools forgotten. Professor Dalla organized her materials, preparing for her next class. She still hadn't noticed him, not really. He was just part of the furniture that he could keep hiding. Keep fixing ventilation systems and electrical panels. Keep being invisible while people discussed his species like a theoretical threat. It was safer that way, but something Dalla had said kept echoing in his mind. You cannot remove the urge to hunt. She was right in a way. Humans did hunt. They hunted for knowledge, for understanding, for connection. They hunted solutions to impossible problems and answers to unanswerable questions. Right now, Ben was hunting for the courage to speak up. He wasn't sure he'd find it. The third lecture happened during a genuine malfunction. Someone had spilled corrosive chemicals near the power relay, and Ben actually needed to spend several hours repairing the damage. He almost felt grateful for the legitimate excuse to be there. Professor Dalla was mid-sentence when he arrived. The question of emotional capacity remains central to understanding Deathworld predators, she was saying. Can creatures evolve for killing truly comprehend concepts like mercy, compassion, or altruism? Ben knelt beside the damaged panel, but his attention was entirely on the lecture. Altruism exists in nature, Toll observed. Even non-sentient creatures display protective behaviors. Within their genetic interests, yes, Dalla agreed. A parent protecting offspring shares genetic material. Pack members defending each other ensure mutual survival. But true altruism, helping someone with no benefit to yourself, no shared genes, no reciprocal advantage, that requires overriding millions of years of evolution. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Prey species evolved altruism because cooperation meant survival. The herd protects the individual. But predators? Every other being is either food, threat, or competition for food. Where's the evolutionary pressure for kindness? Pris spoke up, her voice small. But sentience changes things, doesn't it? We choose our behaviors. Does it? Dalla challenged gently. Or does sentience simply give us sophisticated justifications for our instincts? A predator might refrain from attacking not from compassion, but from calculating that cooperation serves its long-term interests. The result looks like kindness, but the motivation is pure self-interest. Ben's jaw tightened. He'd helped Pris with her transport pod because she looked stressed, and he had the skills to fix it. Not because he expected anything back. Not because of genetic interest or pack dynamics. Because it was the right thing to do. Let me present a scenario, the professor continued. Imagine a Deathworld predator encounters an injured child from another species. What happens? The lecture hall went completely silent. A prey species' instinct is protection, Dallas said. We see vulnerability and want to help. But a predator? Their instinct identifies weakness. An easy target. Even if sentience overrides that instinct, the first impulse would be predatory. Can we trust a species whose first thought upon seeing a helpless child is prey? That's not fair, Ben muttered, too quietly for anyone to hear, but Toll heard something. His crystalline head rotated slightly toward Ben's corner, though he said nothing. They would be experts at deception, the professor continued. Social predators need to infiltrate, to appear harmless until the optimal moment to strike. They'd study prey species, learn our body language, mimic our behaviors. How would we ever know if their friendship was genuine or simply hunting strategy? A student Ben didn't recognize spoke up. Are you saying the classified species couldn't be trusted even if they seemed peaceful? I'm saying we'd never know for certain, Dalla replied. That's what makes them so dangerous. A simple predator you can predict, but an intelligent predator with advanced technology and the ability to blend into society? That's an existential threat. Ben's hands stilled on his tools. She was describing a movie monster, not a person. Not the humans he knew, who built hospitals and schools, who created music and art, who cried at sad stories and laughed at stupid jokes. I've been researching the available data, Dalla continued, her voice dropping. The classified species shows disturbing patterns. They bond with other predator species on their world, not as prey, but as companions. They domesticate creatures that could kill them. That sounds positive, Pris ventured hopefully. Or it demonstrates an ability to manipulate and control dangerous animals, Dalla countered, turning potential threats into weapons. Several of these domesticated creatures are used for tracking, guarding, even attacking on command. They've weaponized other predators. Ben thought about his childhood dog, Max, who'd slept in his bed and stolen food from the counter and licked his face when he was sad. A golden retriever wasn't a weapon. He was family. Furthermore, the professor said, pulling up a blurred image on her display, they display pack markings, artificial modifications to appearance that signal group affiliation, potentially territory markers or dominance indicators. The image showed a human arm with a tattoo. Just a tattoo. Ben had 3 himself. One was a quote from a book. One was his grandmother's birth date. One was a stupid design he'd gotten at 18 and regretted ever since. None of them were dominance markers. They also practice organized violence against their own species, Dalla continued. Historical records show constant warfare, weapons development, tactical innovation. They've been refining their predator skills on each other for thousands of years. A student gasped. Even Toll seemed disturbed by this information. Ben wanted to scream that humans had also developed medicine during those wars, created peace treaties and international laws, built monuments to honor the dead, and sworn to never repeat past mistakes. War was humanity's shame, not its defining feature. Should they be allowed into galactic space? Dalla asked rhetorically. The council is divided. Some argue that containment is cruel and potentially illegal. Others insist that protecting the majority outweighs individual rights of a dangerous species. What do you think, Professor? Toll asked. Dalla was quiet for a long moment. I think fear is a survival instinct for good reason, she finally said. And everything about this species terrifies me. The words hit Ben like a physical blow. She was afraid of him, of humans, of everything his people were and could be. And nothing he could say would change that, because she'd already decided based on theory and evolutionary psychology and worst-case scenarios. They're not monsters, Ben said, not quite meaning to speak aloud. The entire lecture hall turned to look at him. He stood up from behind the panel, tools in hand, suddenly very aware of every pair of eyes watching him. Excuse me, Professor Dallas said, her fur rippling with surprise. The species you're talking about, Ben continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. They're not monsters. They're people. Pris made a small sound of confusion. Toll's structure brightened with what might have been excitement or alarm. You speak as if you know them, Dallas said carefully. I am them, Ben replied. Human. From Earth. The classified Deathworld you've been discussing for 3 lectures while I fixed your equipment and listened to you describe my people like we're nightmare creatures waiting to murder everyone. The silence was absolute. Students froze in their seats. Dalla's 4 arms went very still. You've been here the entire time, she whispered. Every word, Ben confirmed. Every theory about emotionless killers who can't feel empathy. Every suggestion that we should be contained or monitored or kept away from civilized society. I heard all of it. A student near the exit edged toward the door. Others pulled back in their seats. Only Toll leaned forward, fascination overriding fear. And you know what the worst part is? Ben continued, anger finally breaking through. You were sitting 10 meters away from a human for hours and never felt threatened until you knew what I was. I've been working on this station for 4 months. I've helped dozens of students and faculty, fixed equipment, given directions, shared the cafeteria, and nobody was scared of me until this exact moment. Pris's eyes went wide. You fixed my transport pod, she said in realization. I did, Ben confirmed. You thanked me and went on your way. I didn't hunt you. Didn't see you as prey. Just saw someone who needed help. Professor Dalla's voice was strained when she spoke. You should have identified yourself. Why? Ben shot back. So you could reject my help? Report me to security? Treat me like the dangerous predator you've already decided I am? He shook his head. I stayed quiet because I wanted to be treated like a person, not a threat. Apparently, that was too much to ask. Emergency lights suddenly activated. Someone had triggered the security alert. Ben raised his hand slowly, deliberately non-threatening. I'm not going to hurt anyone, he said clearly. I never was. Red emergency lights painted the lecture hall in harsh shadows. An automated voice announced security was responding to a potential threat. Ben stood with his hands raised while students pressed against the far walls. Everyone remained calm, Professor Dallas said, though her voice shook slightly. She moved between Ben and the students, a protective gesture that Ben found both touching and insulting. I don't need you to shield them from me, Ben said quietly. I'm not going to attack. You're a Deathworld predator who just revealed himself in a room full of prey species, Dalla countered. What did you expect would happen? Honestly, Ben lowered his hands slowly. I expected exactly this. Fear, panic, assumptions. That's why most humans on the station stay quiet about where we're from. Toll's crystalline form chimed softly. There are others? 47 of us across various stations, Ben confirmed. Maintenance workers, engineers, technicians. Low-profile jobs where nobody asks too many questions about our homeworld. You're spying, a student accused from the back row. We're working, Ben corrected. Earning pay, following regulations, trying to integrate into galactic society. The council knows we're here. They approved our work permits while they debate our official status. Professor Dalla's fur had flattened slightly, a sign her immediate panic was fading into wary alertness. Why reveal yourself now? Because I'm tired, Ben admitted. Tired of being invisible. Tired of listening to people discuss my species like we're theoretical monsters instead of real people. You've spent 3 lectures explaining why humans can't feel empathy or compassion. I've spent 4 months proving you wrong just by existing peacefully on this station. Pris had been huddled under a desk, but slowly emerged. You really helped me with my transport pod because you wanted to help? Not because you were studying me or planning something. I helped because you looked stressed and I had a wrench, Ben said simply. That's it. No hiding agenda. Just basic kindness. Kindness could be a strategy, Dalla pointed out, though she sounded less certain than before. Social predators use, I know what your lectures said, Ben interrupted, but you're wrong. Or at least, you're incomplete. Yes, humans are predators. Yes, we evolved on a dangerous world. Yes, we have hunting instincts and pattern recognition and all the things you described. But we're also more than that. Toll moved closer, his earlier fear apparently overridden by scientific curiosity. Explain. Ben took a breath, organizing his thoughts. Humans bonded with wolves 30,000 years ago. Not as prey, not as weapons, but as partners. We shared food and shelter. Those wolves became dogs. Now, there are hundreds of dog breeds, all living with humans because both species chose companionship over survival competition. You said this already, Dalla noted. Manipulating other predators. We also bonded with cats, Ben continued. Cats domesticated themselves because they liked being near humans. We gave them food and safety. They gave us pest control and company. Nobody trained them. Nobody forced them. They chose to stay. Several students exchanged glances. This clearly didn't fit the monster narrative. Humans cry, Ben added. We cry when we're sad, when we're happy, when we see something beautiful. We cry at fictional stories about characters who don't exist. We cry when animals die in movies. What predator wastes energy on emotions that serve no survival purpose? Manipulation, a student suggested weakly. Of who? Ben Chelinst. When I cry watching a sad movie alone in my quarters, who am I manipulating? When humans cry at weddings or funerals or graduation ceremonies, what's the hunting strategy there? Silence. Even Dalla seemed to be genuinely considering his words. We create art, Ben continued. Music, paintings, sculptures, stories. We spend enormous resources on things that don't help us hunt or survive. We build museums to preserve history, libraries to share knowledge, parks and gardens just because we like how plants look. Many species do these things, Toll observed. Exactly, Ben agreed. We're not unique in our capacity for culture. We're just predators who also happen to have culture. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Professor Dalla moved to her podium, leaning against it as if needing support. Your species has a history of violence. Wars, weapons, organized killing. We do. Ben didn't deny it. Humans have done terrible things to each other and to other species on our planet. We've made mistakes, big ones, but we've also learned from them, built international laws, created the Geneva Conventions to limit war's cruelty, established protected reserves for endangered animals we once hunted. We chose to be better than our worst instincts. Choice, dalla ripete softly. You believe choice matters more than evolution? I believe sentience means having choice, Ben said. Yes, I have instincts. Every species does. But I also have the ability to recognize those instincts and decide whether to follow them. That's what sentience is. The power to override programming. Pris Venture question. Do you ever want to hurt people? Honestly, Ben appreciated her directness. Sometimes I get angry or frustrated, same as anyone. But wanting to hurt someone and actually doing it are different things. Every species has negative impulses. Civilization is about not acting on them. But your impulses are more dangerous, Dalla argued. A frustrated herbivore might be rude. A frustrated predator might kill. Might, Ben emphasized, but doesn't. How many humans are on this station? 47. How many violent incidents? 0. We're not dangerous because we might be capable of violence. We're safe because we choose not to be violent. Toll chimed thoughtfully. The professor's lectures focused on capability, not choice. Because capability is terrifying, Dalla admitted. When I look at you now, knowing what you are, I see all the ways you could hurt everyone in this room. Forward-facing eyes, tracking movement. Hands that could grip and strike. Physical build suggesting strength and endurance. Every detail confirms predator morphology. But I'm not hurting anyone, Ben pointed out. I'm having a conversation. That should count for something. It does, she said quietly. But fear isn't always rational. The emergency lights stopped flashing. Security had apparently decided not to storm in immediately, though Ben could see guards posted outside the sealed doors through the small windows. Tell me about your home world, Toll requested suddenly. Not the predator classifications. The actual planet. Ben smiled slightly. Earth is beautiful. Oceans that cover most of the surface. Mountains, forests, deserts, tundra. We have thousands of ecosystems, millions of species. Yes, some are dangerous, but most are just living their lives. And humans protect them now. We have national parks larger than some nations, dedicated to preserving wildlife. Why? Pris asked. If you're predators, why protect prey animals? Because we realized everything is connected, Ben explained. Remove one species and ecosystems collapse. We almost learned that lesson too late. Killed off several species before we understood what we were doing. Now we work to bring some back, preserve others, maintain balance. That doesn't sound like predator behavior, a student observed. It's exactly predator behavior, Ben countered. Smart predators don't destroy their hunting grounds. They maintain them. But for humans, it's more than that. We protect animals because we value them, not just as resources but as fellow living things sharing our planet. Professor Dalla was quiet for a long time, her large eyes studying Ben with new intensity. Finally, she spoke. You're asking us to trust that your species can overcome millions of years of evolution. No, Ben corrected gently. I'm asking you to recognize that we already have. Security eventually opened the doors after Professor Dalla convinced them she was safe. Several students left immediately, too frightened to stay. Others remained, curiosity outweighing fear. Pris stayed, though she kept her distance. Toll had moved to the front row, recording everything. Ben sat on the edge of the lecture platform, deliberately making himself less imposing. I should probably explain why I came to these lectures in the first place. Please do, Dallas said, settling into a student's seat rather than standing at her podium. The gesture felt significant somehow. I was angry at first, Ben admitted. Hearing you describe humans like monsters made me defensive. But I kept coming back because I wanted to understand how you saw us. Why the galaxy is so afraid. And what did you learn? Toll asked. That fear makes sense from your perspective, Ben said honestly. If I only knew humans through evolutionary theory and worst-case scenarios, I'd probably be scared too. You're working with incomplete information and filling gaps with logical assumptions. Those assumptions just happen to be wrong. Dalla's fur rippled, a sign of agitation. My assumptions come from experience, not just theory. The room went quiet. This was clearly personal. My home colony was raided 15 years ago, she continued, her voice tight, by a species from a Class 3 world. Predators, though not Deathworld level. They wanted our resources and saw us as obstacles rather than people. I'm sorry, Ben said softly. 73 people died, Dalla continued. I survived by hiding in a storage container for 2 days. When I finally emerged, I saw what predators do when there's no one to stop them. So yes, I'm afraid. I have reason to be. Ben nodded slowly. You absolutely do. And I can't take that experience away or make it less real. But those predators aren't humans. We're not responsible for what they did. You're all predators, a student said. What makes humans different? Choice, Ben repeated. The species that attacked Professor Dalla's colony chose violence. Humans could make that choice too. We have the capability. But most of us, the vast majority, choose differently. Pris spoke up hesitantly. How do we know that? How can we be sure? You can't, Ben admitted. Not with absolute certainty. Same way I can't be absolutely certain you won't poison my food or sabotage my life support. Trust requires risk. But look at the evidence. 47 humans working peacefully on stations across the galaxy. No incidents. No violence. Just people doing their jobs. That's a small sample size, Toll observed analytically. True, Ben agreed. But humans number in the billions on Earth. If we were uncontrollable predators, would we have built cities, created laws, developed philosophy and ethics, and entire fields of study dedicated to understanding right and wrong? Some species argue ethics are just sophisticated survival strategies, Dallas said. Maybe, Ben allowed. But does the motivation matter if the result is peaceful coexistence? If humans choose not to hurt people because we think it's wrong versus choosing not to hurt people because cooperation benefits us, does the reasoning change the outcome? Toll chimed thoughtfully. A philosophical question. Do moral actions require moral motivations? Humans debate that constantly, Ben said. We have entire schools of philosophy dedicated to it. Deontology, consequentialism, virtue ethics. We can't even agree among ourselves what makes something right or wrong. But we all agree that some things are wrong. Hurting innocent people, taking what isn't ours, destroying without purpose. Yet humans have done all those things throughout history, a student pointed out. We have, been acknowledged, and we're ashamed of it. We teach our children about past mistakes so they won't repeat them. We build memorials to remember victims. We create laws to prevent future harm. Every human civilization that's lasted has learned that cooperation beats competition in the long run. Professor Dallas stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the station corridor. Guards still waited outside, watching. You said humans bond with other species, even predators like dogs and cats. How does that work? Ben considered his answer carefully. Dogs were wolves once. Dangerous pack hunters. But some wolves started following human camps, eating scraps. Humans found them useful for warning about threats. Over time, both species changed. Wolves became less aggressive, more social with humans. Humans learned to read dog body language, to care for them. It wasn't instant. It took thousands of years. But both species chose partnership. And cats? Pris asked. Cats domesticated themselves, Ben smiled. Humans started farming, which attracted rodents. Cats hunted rodents. Humans appreciated the pest control and started leaving out food. Cats decided humans were acceptable servants and moved in. They're still semi-independent, but they chose to stay near us. Servants? Toll chimed with what might have been amusement. Cat owners joke that cats are in charge, Ben explained. They demand food, attention, perfect sleeping spots. And we give it to them because we love them, even though they're predators who sometimes bring us dead animals as gifts. Several students made sounds of disgust. Dalla turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. You keep using that word, she observed. Love. You said it earlier, too, about crying at movies and weddings. Humans love a lot of things, Ben said. People, animals, places, ideas. It's one of our defining traits. We form emotional attachments that aren't always logical or beneficial. We adopt disabled animals who can't hunt. We keep plants in our homes just because they're pretty. We cry over characters in stories. That sounds like weakness, a student suggested. It's our greatest strength, Ben countered. Love makes us protect things beyond our immediate survival needs. Love makes us build societies that care for the weak and elderly. Love makes us create beauty and preserve history and reach for the stars hoping to find friends instead of just resources. Dalla returned to her seat, settling in as if making a decision. If I'm understanding correctly, you're arguing that humans are predators who evolved empathy despite it being evolutionarily disadvantageous? Not despite, Ben corrected. Because of, humans are social predators. We survived through cooperation. A lone human in the wilderness dies quickly. A group of humans working together can thrive anywhere. Empathy is what makes cooperation possible. Understanding what others feel, anticipating their needs, building trust. Those are survival skills for social species. But you apply empathy beyond your species, Toll noted. To animals, to aliens, to fictional characters. That exceeds survival necessity. Once you develop empathy, it's hard to turn off, Ben explained. We see something suffering and we want to help. Doesn't matter if it's human or dog or alien or even a robot. If it seems to feel pain, we respond emotionally. Pris had gradually moved closer during the conversation. She was now only a few seats away from Ben. When I thank you for fixing my transport pod, you seemed happy. Was that genuine? Completely, Ben assured her. Helping people feels good to humans. We get satisfaction from solving problems, from being useful, from making others happy. It's built into how we think. That sounds pleasant, she said quietly. It has been agreed. It's also sometimes exhausting because we can't always fix things. But the impulse to try is always there. Professor Dalla was quiet for a long moment, her large eyes studying Ben with an expression he couldn't quite read. Finally, she spoke. I've been afraid of your species for so long, since before I knew you existed. Afraid of what Deathworld predators would mean for the galaxy. And now, Ben asked, now I'm afraid I've been wrong, she admitted, which is somehow more frightening. 3 weeks later, Ben walked in a lecture hall 14B through the front door. No pretending to fix equipment. No hiding in corners. Professor Dalla had invited him officially, and he'd accepted. The room was packed. Word had spread about the human who'd confronted a xenobiology class. Students from other departments had requested permission to attend. Several faculty members sat in the back rows. Even a council observer was present, taking notes. Ben felt nervous but tried not to show it. He dressed carefully in clean work clothes, not wanting to seem like he was trying too hard, but also not wanting to appear sloppy. First impressions mattered. Even if this was technically a second chance at first impressions, Professor Dalla greeted him at the podium. Thank you for coming. Thank you for asking, Ben replied. They'd met twice since the confrontation to plan today's session. The conversations had been awkward but productive. The lecture hall settled into expectant silence. Dalla addressed her students with calm authority. Today we continue our study of Deathworld classification, but with a significant revision to my previous lectures. I taught you theory without sufficient evidence. I made assumptions based on fear rather than facts. Today, we learn from direct experience. She gestured to Ben. This is Ben Carter, maintenance engineer and human. He's agreed to share information about Earth and human culture. I encourage questions, but remember this is a person, not a specimen. Ben stepped forward, suddenly very aware of dozens of eyes watching him. I'm not a professor, he started. I'm just a guy who fixes broken equipment and apparently crashes xenobiology lectures. A few students made sounds that might have been laughter. The tension eased slightly. Professor Dalla asked me to talk about being human, Ben continued. That's harder than it sounds because I've never been anything else. It's like asking a fish to describe water. But I'll try. He pulled up images on a holographic display. Earth from space, blue and green and beautiful. This is home. Class 5 Deathworld by galactic standards. Humans call it paradise. The images shifted. Forests, oceans, mountains, cities. Earth has incredible biodiversity. Millions of species in thousands of ecosystems. Yes, some are dangerous. We have predators that could easily kill humans. Bears, big cats, crocodiles, sharks. We respect them, but we also live alongside them. A student raised a tentacle. Do you hunt them? Some people do, but it's heavily regulated, Ben explained. Most humans never hunt anything. We buy food from stores. The food is grown on farms or caught by professional fishers following strict quotas to prevent overfishing. We learn the hard way that destroying populations crashes ecosystems. Toll spoke up from his usual front row position. You mentioned keeping predators as companions. Explain dogs. Ben smiled and switched to images of various dog breeds. The students reacted with mixed fascination and concern. These are all dogs, all descended from wolves. This tiny one weighs 2 kilograms. This large one weighs 70 kilograms. Both are predators by ancestry. Both live in human homes as family members. They look very different, Pris observed. She'd been attending every lecture since the confrontation, gradually overcoming her fear. Humans bred them for different purposes, Ben explained. Some for herding livestock, some for hunting, some just for companionship. But all of them bond with humans emotionally. They get excited when we come home. They comfort us when we're sad. They play with our children. He showed a video of a small child hugging a large dog. The dog's tail wagged gently. Several students made concerned noises. The dog could hurt the child easily, Ben acknowledged. But it chooses not to, because the dog loves the child, and the child trusts the dog completely. That's the relationship humans have built with former predators. How did you accomplish this? A faculty member asked. Time, patience, and mutual benefit, Ben said. Also understanding that different individuals have different temperaments. Not every wolf wanted to join humans. Not every dog breed is good with children. We learned to recognize personalities and respect boundaries. Professor Dalla asked her first question. You said humans cry at weddings and stories. Explain this emotional response. Ben thought about how to articulate something so fundamental. Humans experience emotions intensely. Joy, sadness, fear, love. Sometimes the feelings are so strong, they overflow physically. Tears, laughter, trembling. At weddings, we cry because we're happy for people starting their lives together. At sad stories, we cry because we imagine the character's pain as if it were our own. Empathy, Toll stated. Exactly, Ben agreed. We feel what others feel, or at least imagine we do. It makes us want to help, to protect, to comfort, even when the others aren't human. He showed images of human doctors treating injured animals, wildlife rehabilitation centers, marine sanctuaries. We spend enormous resources saving species we don't need for food or survival. We do it because we believe they have value just by existing. A student asked, What about humans who don't feel this way? Who do hurt others? Ben appreciated the directness. They exist. Every species probably has individuals who don't follow social norms. Humans have criminals, people who hurt others for various reasons. But they're exceptions, not the rule. And we have systems to stop them. Laws, police, courts, prisons. We don't tolerate violence just because we're capable of it. Your history includes wars, the Council Observer noted. Organized violence on massive scales. It does, Ben didn't deny. Humans have fought over territory, resources, beliefs. We've made terrible weapons and used them. But we've also learned from every war. Created international laws. Built alliances. Established the United Nations to resolve conflicts peacefully. Every generation tries to do better than the last. Professor Dalla pulled up her own images. Historical footage of human conflicts. This is what frightened me. Evidence of predator nature. It should frighten everyone, Ben agreed. It frightens humans too. That's why we work so hard to prevent it. War isn't our natural state. Peace is what we strive for. The questions continued for over an hour. Some hostile, most curious, all revealing gaps in galactic understanding of humans. Ben answered everything honestly, not hiding human flaws, but providing context. Finally, Dalla asked the question Ben had been expecting. Should humans be allowed unrestricted access to galactic society? The room went silent. Everyone wanted to hear his answer. No, Ben said, surprising them. Not unrestricted. We should earn trust gradually, prove ourselves reliable, demonstrate peaceful intentions over time. Same as any new species joining the galactic community. We're asking for fair evaluation, not special treatment. What do you want people to know about humans? Pris asked softly. Ben considered carefully. That we're people, complicated, contradictory, capable of both kindness and cruelty. We're predators who choose not to hunt. We're Deathworlders who build gardens. We're individuals, not a monolith. Some of us are better than others. But most of us are just trying to live good lives, help when we can, and leave things better than we found them. The lecture ended with more questions and answers, but that felt appropriate. Understanding took time. Afterward, students approached Ben cautiously. Toll wanted to establish regular interviews for his research. A faculty member asked if Ben would guest lecture in other classes. The council observer requested a formal meeting. Pris waited until others had left. Can I ask something personal? Sure, Ben said. Are you lonely here? Away from other humans? Ben smiled sadly. Sometimes. I miss my family. Miss home. But I'm making friends. Slowly. And that helps. I'd like to be your friend, Pris said quietly. If that's allowed. I'd like that too, Ben replied honestly. Professor Dalla approached as Pris left. You did well today. So did you, Ben said. Admitting you were wrong in front of everyone couldn't have been easy. It was necessary, she said. Science requires updating theories when evidence contradicts them. Your evidence that my theories were incomplete. Just one data point, Ben cautioned. Don't judge all humans by me. I won't, Dalla promised. But I'll start with you and expand from there. It's better than judging all humans by my fears. They walked together to the corridor. The station felt different to Ben now. Less hostile, more like a place he might actually belong. His communicator chimed. A message from Earth. More humans were coming to the station. The council had approved expanded cultural exchange. Ben's confrontation had apparently convinced them that hiding humans wasn't working. Something wrong? Dalla asked, noticing his expression. Something right, Ben corrected. More humans are coming. We're going to need orientation programs, cultural liaisons, probably more guest lectures. A lot of work, Dalla observed. Worth it though, Ben said. Every conversation changes perspectives a little. Every friendship builds bridges. Maybe in a few years, humans won't be the scary Deathworlders anymore. Maybe we'll just be neighbors. Maybe, Dalla agreed. I'm willing to find out. Ben smiled. It was a start. Not perfect, not complete, but genuine. The galaxy was learning that predators could be people too, and people, regardless of their origins, could choose kindness over instinct, cooperation over competition, hope over fear. One conversation at a time. Humans were proving they belonged among the stars.